Hey friends, today I'm showing you how to hack the going home sweater to add bands on the side and snaps for nursing access. This is a fun and simple pattern hack. Go ahead and stick around and we'll get started. So first thing we're going to do is take our front and back bodice piece and we're just going to straighten out the sides there. This does two things. It allows us to add a band a little bit more easily because we have a straight side there. And it also gives us a little bit more ease through the waist, which is helpful during maternity. Now this pattern does have a band at the bottom, so since we're not using the band at the bottom, if you want to add length, this is a good time to do so. I chose not to. Next, I am tracing out a 3-inch wide piece, and this is going to be our band that we're adding to the side. Now, I'm just cutting extra length and folding that in half, and I'll show you why. When we add our band onto the side, it is going to be folded in half, so that basically gives you a good idea of what the pattern piece is going to look like. Then we're going to line it up with the side because I want to trace the bottom length, and then I also want to continue that arm side back up so the top of our band actually has a little bit of a curve in it. We do this with the pattern piece folded so that when we add our band and we overlap them, it not only aligns with the arm side that we are attaching it to, but it aligns while it is folded in half. So I went ahead and labeled that pattern piece. And then what I forgot to show after this is that you also have to alter the sleeve since we're adding the width of the band. So just add a 1/2 of an inch to the raw edge of your sleeve to make sure that those match up properly. And that's our final alteration, so we can cut our pieces. Now we have our back and our front bodice piece, our neck band, 2 sleeves, and then for our bands, we actually need 4 of those because we have 1 on each side of the front, 1 on each side of the back. And you'll see that I added interfacing to one side of the bands. I did that on all 4, and we do that because you need some reinforcement in knit fabric for snaps. I use the Knit and Stable interfacing. It is nice and lightweight. It still maintains a little bit of stretch, but you have to have interfacing so that your snaps don't rip through your fabric. So make sure and add that to your bands. We'll go ahead and open our front bodice piece, and I'm going to go ahead and pin my band to the side. Now make sure that when you turn it right way that curve is continued just like we made our pattern piece, because we want to make sure that that works along the underarm for overlapping properly. So I'm going to go ahead and serge that and turn it over and top stitch the right side with the seam allowance towards the bodice. Now that that's done, you can see that that curve under the arm go ahead and continues back up, and that top stitching makes everything lay nice and flat. You don't want this to be really bulky, so I definitely recommend ironing and top stitching as you go. Now, once you have all 4 of your bands attached, we'll sew our shoulder seams. And this next step is where we start our overlap. So once those shoulder seams are sewn together, you're going to fold this in half, right sides together again. But we're not going to sew right sides together like you normally would. You actually have to place those bands on top of each other so that your sleeve is then sewn in the round. Now that means that the back of one band is going to be facing the front of another band, and I like to make sure that my front bodice band is on top, meaning that when you're wearing the sweater, the front band is going to be on the outermost side. That way you don't see the split of the band from the front of your shirt. So we're going to baste the top of those 2 bands, and we're going to go ahead and sew that side of our sleeve together so that we can install it in the round. Now once the tops of your bands are basted together and you've sewn the side of your sleeve, we're going to turn these the opposite way from the way that they're facing. So we need the bodice piece to be inside out, and we need our sleeve to be right side out, so that when you put the sleeve on the inside, you're installing it right sides together. So I am matching up the seam of the sleeve with the center of the 2 bands to center that bottom side, and then you saw me mark the center of the top of the sleeve, and I'm aligning that with the shoulder seam. Now you can go ahead and add extra clips around the rest of your sleeve to sew that in. And once you have that clipped really well, you can go ahead and sew in the round and repeat for your second sleeve. Now we have that all sewn and right sides out. You can see our sides are split, and then from the front of the shirt, that band is on top of the other one. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hem the shirt and add our neckband, and then we will install our snaps last. So for our snap installation, I'm using my Kam Snap press, and then I'm using Fashion Snaps for this sweater. I really like the way they look. They have a nice gunmetal tone to them, which I think looks really pretty, really professional. So I'll zoom in here to show you how that works. And I'm going to test on a piece of scrap fabric so that you can actually see how this goes. And I always store my dies in the container with the corresponding snap piece so that I know which part goes with which. So it's really easy to remember that way. And the 4 pieces of a fashion snap are a cap and a socket, which go on one side, and then the stud and post, which go on the other side. This photo is from Kam Snaps, and it just shows that you place the cap, the socket, and the stud basically face in to your die pieces, and that is how they are then installed into your fabric. So we'll start by putting our cap piece in. You can see that nice gunmetal finish on the side. That goes on the bottom, and then our socket goes face up into the die piece in the top, and you just use your finger and kind of pop that up into there. You can feel it click, and then again, this is just a scrap piece of fabric, but you press that down in there and you pop it out, and it is just a perfectly installed snap. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to remove those dies and put in the stud and post dies to show you what that looks like. Now these are super simple. You can see the side with the threading just gets screwed up into the top. The bottom piece just sets down in there, and then we will go ahead and install that, which is our post, goes on the bottom, and our stud piece pops face up with the pointed part up into the stud die. And same thing, you just use your finger and you just kind of pop it up in there. Now I definitely recommend doing this on a piece of scrap fabric like I mentioned, so you can make sure that your snaps are facing the right way and everything. But all you have to do is press that down and you have a beautiful little snap there. Nice finish, nice and flat on the back, and it looks super professional. So that is what that installation looks like. We'll go ahead and put the cap and socket die pieces back in, and I will do all of the cap and sockets, and then I'll remove them and do all of our stud and posts. What I am going to do is measure out with a ruler how far apart I want those snaps. Now this is totally personal preference. You can do as many or as few snaps as you like. I don't typically like to space them out too much just because I don't want a gap showing through where you can kind of see your skin or anything through the side of the shirt. So I ended up doing mine, I want to say about every 1.5 to 2 inches. Again, this is personal preference, and that's why I like to go out and mark them with pins so I see if I'm liking that spacing or I want to pull that apart and do a little bit further apart or a little bit closer together. So I went ahead and switched out my dies, and I've got a cap and socket in there now. And then I'm just going to center my snaps on the center of the band and use that pin as a guide for where to install it. So I'm going to remove the pin before I do this, of course. You get that centered in place, pull your pin out, and then you press down and you've got your cap and your socket installed. We'll go through and do that same process all the way down the side, and I'll speed it up for you since it's the same for all of the snaps. You don't need to see all of them, but that is a pretty simple process. You've got your dies installed, so you don't need to switch them out every time. We're just going to do all of one kind and then switch the dies out to do all of the other kind of the snaps. Once we have all of our caps and sockets installed down the wood side, what I'm going to do is lay that right on top of the other band and use those with them laying nice and flat to mark where I'm putting my stud and my post. You could measure this from the top again, but I like to do the pins after I have installed the caps and sockets, just so I know that they're going to line up perfectly and I don't get any gaping or anything between my snaps. They're going to lay perfectly. So you can see I'm just using I'm rolling it back and then using the socket as kind of a guide as to where I want to put those pins, and we'll go ahead and use those pins to install our studs. Now that we have all of our stud and post side installed, you can see that that gives a really nice finish on the inside. It's nice and flat against the skin, and we can turn that all right sides out. I'm going to snap them together and you'll see that this just lays really nice and flat, especially because of that top stitching and this snap style. You don't have a lot of bulk in there, and it just looks really beautiful when it's all finished up. Everything lays perfectly, and you repeat that on the other side. You are all done. The favorite sweater has a nice amount of ease, so this is a great nursing sweater. I'm super excited to have it for when baby boy arrives. Thank you so much for joining me for this hack. Please make sure and pop some comments down below on what you think of this hack. I'll also leave a discount code for Kam Snaps for our viewers, and if you don't have a Kam Snaps press, you can pick one up using that for 10% off. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next hack video.